Welcome back, everyone. If you're just tuning in, today we're focusing on network slicing. But first, a reminder about today's riddle. How many CTOs does it take to screw in a light bulb? Post your answer in the chat. And don't forget to follow MEF on LinkedIn. Remember, we'll be highlighting the winner of today's riddle in episode 6 and on social media. All right, let's spin the pie wheel one more time. Here we go. Oh, there it is. All right, it's time for our first deep dive of the day. For a look at how 5G is driving innovation in enterprise services, where it is now and where it's going, I sat down for a conversation with Troy Saulnier, Network Strategy at Bell Canada, Gordon Wong, Director Product Management at the One Network by Ericsson, and Mark Gilmour, VP Mobile Connectivity Solutions at Colt Technology Services. All right, let's get started. Gentlemen, first off, thank you so much for being here. Let's begin with some introductions. If you'd be so kind, please share a little bit about yourself and your role in your organization. Let's go Troy, Gordon, Mark, please. Troy, take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. It's my pleasure to be here to share a little bit of insight with folks. My name is Troy Saulnier, and I have the pleasure of supporting a team at Bell Canada that looks at a number of items in our smart core, like data insights, cloud, 5G core, and multi-access edge compute. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Troy. My name is Gordon. I'm a Director of Product Management at the Ericsson Technology and Emerging Businesses. I'm working with a team that's specifically developing new solutions and services for enterprises capitalizing on the promises of 5G.
Hi, and I'm Mark Gilmour, based in the UK. I head up a small team in Colt Technology Services that looks after new verticals or new opportunities with wireless and cellular technology for our customers and for the impact then to the Colt network and the wider ecosystem.
Great. Thank you again for that, and thank you for being here today. Let's get into it now. Troy, let's start off with you. General question here. Where would you say 5G is today, and where will it be in the near future?
Thanks, Jeff. I think a lot of folks are really familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, and there's been a lot of noise about 5G for some time. The reality is, globally, there's been a lot of deployments with 5G, a number of announcements. Typically, they've been what's called 5G NSA, or non-standalone mode, which means that you're leveraging 5G new radio, but you're still reliant on an LTE or 4G core. The exception to that is in China, where there's been a mandate for 5G SA rollout specifically in something like 300 cities. And what we're seeing this year in 2021 is a lot of POCs. We're seeing a lot of trials and specific services that are use case driven for enterprises or business customers that are going to leverage some of the promises around 5G that we're going to talk about more in this segment. And then in 2022, I think is when we'll see really 5G SA, full 5G on the radio side and core take off globally.
Okay, so we're talking a lot today about slicing. So why should we care about slicing, and what kinds of services are taking advantage of slicing?
Excellent, Jeff. So, you hear about 5G and a lot of the talk is around, increase in speed because of new spectrum that's there, or you'll hear, a decrease in terms of latency, better response time. But the reality is the big promise of 5G, I think most folks in the industry feel is the differentiation that it can offer. The fact that you can have on one physical network the ability to virtually slice across the network and offer different capabilities for the customers, use cases, and services as they require. So to start off with, even today in our LTE or 4G network, we use QCIs to differentiate a little bit the services in between. As we evolve to 5G and slicing, we'll start with what's called static slicing. And all that means is we have to manually configure all of the parameters for a static slice. So things like latency, how much bandwidth, min, max, ideas like, packet loss thresholds and so on. But they have to be managed on a case-by-case basis. So the services that you'll see initially eventually will be, services that are really important to have latency and to have priority, like safety services. And as we kind of go forward, we'll start to see more services at enterprise, business services that are across the board. And then eventually, as we start to add orchestration and automation engines to the 5G networks, we'll have dynamic slicing. And that the value of dynamic slicing is beyond the standard 3GPP slicing types that you have, like EMBB, MMTC, and being able to look at growing it. We have the ability to dynamically add and remove slices and even control them in real time in the network. So there's the idea of slicing as a service where an enterprise might be in a position to have their own slice or even multiple slices. Thinking about something like private networks, you might have a mine where, they need to have, for example, a slice for voice service where, latency in real time is important, but they don't need a lot of bandwidth. They might have a different slice for, say, large data transfers, for data analysis, where it's really important to have a big best effort piece of bandwidth. And on the other hand, machine critical timing is going to be needed as a slice to be able to control the machinery in the mine. That's a bit of an example of slicing. I could talk for days on it, but I'll pass it back to you, Jeff. Thank you.
All right. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, Troy. Mark, coming to you now, how do you see the market evolving and the position of slicing?
Well, Troy made a really good introduction into that, in that the 5G market at the moment has been dominated by the EMBB, the mobile broadband play by the mobile operators themselves. And that's the natural evolution. And to be honest, it's been a pretty good success in rolling out so quickly from standardization to commercialization. That evolution now is where we're going to see a bit of a democratization, I think, of that space. We're going to see more players come in and operators being able to do more than just provide mobile broadband services. And this is where I think then private cellular as a standalone piece, or indeed private cellular or for enterprises as a network slice, for example. And this is where there can be real benefit. So the kind of that position of slicing means that operators or wholesalers can petition the network to be able then to provide differentiated services for differentiated use cases or differentiated performance requirements for the services that match the services, rather than a kind of compromise that needs to take place.
Got it. Thank you for that, Mark.
Jeff,
Gordon, let's. Oh yeah, please.
I was just going to say, Jeff, if I can add a couple remarks to Mark's comments there. For those who aren't familiar with slicing and differentiation, you can think of it this way. It's almost like you have a pie, and that's all the resources in your network. And today, without slicing, everyone gets the same slice of pie. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're someone from safety, whether you're someone a regular consumer or a business enterprise, you get the same slice. With slicing, I can dial it and say the folks who really need latency are going to get a bigger slice of that pie from a resource perspective so that they can truly realize that power. Thanks, Jeff.
Fantastic. Thank you. Gordon, let's move to you now. Can we pull back a bit? What is enabling technology behind 5G network slicing?
Thank you, Jeff. That is a very good question. I think 5G network slicing, as Troy mentioned, is being promised as enabling tools for the CSP to offering these new services across different industry verticals. At the essence, I think I really like the pie analogies. It offers the end-to-end resources, a slice of the network that's dedicated across the RAN, transport, and the 5G networks. And what 5G is, what the new technology is providing compared to 4G is when the slice is being set up in the individual domain, 5G is offering CSP the ability to, with a single network slicing identifier across all the domain and the in-band protocols to supporting the devices to select a specific slice. And also 5G is offering the promises with end-to-end orchestration of the slice, including design, configurations, instantiations, lifecycle management, and ordering to enable CSP with better scale and achieve lower time to market. But what I think is important is the fundamental technology that is new in 5G. I think Troy also mentioned a couple of points is the availability of the new spectrum, especially in the high band, is going to give us abundance of the bandwidth. But also importantly is in the unlicensed spectrum, for example, in the US, in the CBRS, in Germany, 3.7 gigahertz bandwidth for those campus and local network available for the private network, as well as technologies such as harnessing these additional spectrum with carrier aggregations. But beyond these points, and also lower latency in the radio and the RAN side of innovations with lower transmission time intervals and scheduler enhancement to support ultra reliable low latency. But something else that is also interesting together with the 5G and the telco network is the ability to expose these network services with a simple SBA-based architectures and allow them to be exposed to third-party partners and to leverage these capabilities from the operators, as well as the growing interest in not only in the edge, but also near edge computing type of applications to enable these low latency applications to be available not only to the selected fews, but to be available widely to many applications across the macro cellular network.
Jeff,
a lot there. Yeah,
Jeff,
please.
Can I come in on that? I'm really glad that Gordon mentioned about the service-based architecture, the SBA, because I think that is probably the most fundamental change that enables all these differentiated services to take place. The fact that we can take different components of the network, put them into a network slice, for example, and move them to the correct position that they need to be from a performance point of view for the end customer application. So Gordon mentioned there with latency or indeed bandwidth may be another one, and you may need latency and bandwidth. So you can move the parts of the core network and the RAN network to be in the right place to attain that latency budget or to attain that bandwidth budget. And that to me is the greatest technology advantage or movement that has happened with 5G that then opens up the opportunities for all of these different use cases that we start to talk about. So I think that's really critical to this, because without that, you'd end up with just partitioning the network, but it would still all be in the same place, and you would still be limited by network dynamics across that. But being able to move those components around to where they're needed, and then if you want to put them in a network slice, great.
Thank you, Mark. Gordon, before we move on here, I do want to ask you, can you give us some specific examples of the innovation and opportunity, and what is the industry trend?
Absolutely. I think it's always helpful to connect these technologies in the context and relate to real life examples. And I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to engage with some of these ongoing or emerging opportunity. I think if we provide the examples in 3 segments, one in consumer, one in the industry, and another in the enterprise domain. I think for the consumer, there's a lot of interest. You may have heard a lot of it in the news globally with these cloud gaming players partnering with the 5G operator, testing out streaming games. But then also that fancy yourself that the ability to go into a VR cafe that is served by the 5G private network that give you theme park experiences closer to your home rather than going to a theme park. So those are some examples on the consumer side. Now on the industry domain, think about autonomous vehicle, autonomous drones that's going to be served on the private slice on the macro network. That's really helping guiding these new application, enable new services for logistical companies. And also think about smart factories, which you are not only just connecting sensors or basic narrowband IoT devices, but now you're connecting next generation of mission critical IoT devices that is actually controlling the critical operations inside a factory. Now, I think coming to the topic of this discussion for enterprises, imagine that you're having your enterprise VPN services today, but it's actually tied to a slice, which you can actually guarantee your performance end to end. So these are some of the newer examples that we're seeing emerging opportunity happening in the industry. And I think the opportunity just keep growing in the area.
Very exciting. Thank you. Mark, back to you now. Let's talk a little bit about Colt specifically. What steps has Colt been taking in enabling 5G to benefit enterprises?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It's funny enough, our preparation for this 5G era actually started a number of years ago when we made the decision to move our global Ethernet network, our global IP network, to a software-defined network. We were an early adopter of SDN and took that from every layer, from our opticals up to the IP layer, and put in automation and software-defined control into that network so that we could create an on-demand portfolio. We've seen that on a separate note, we've seen a huge benefit of that in the current pandemic, because that's enabled our customers to be able to respond to changing dynamics and changing need. But as part of that move, it then enabled us to modernize the network to be able to take in new technologies that will be part of a network slice. That will be part of being able to differentiate services, not necessarily for 5G, but as part of that. So we've introduced things such as segment routing or segment routing, depending on which side of the pond you're on. We implemented that now nearly 2 years ago to be ready and bringing that in to enable dynamic, flexible transports. Right, to be able to serve these 5G use cases. The other thing, of course, is building out that fiber network. We talk about the world disconnecting from wires, and that is exactly the case. My laptop, I can't remember. Well, actually, it's never been connected to a physical port because, well, it hasn't got one. You have to put a dongle in for it to connect. But the reality is that while that initial access connection is wireless, it's cabled and it's fiber up to that if you can. That's the best way forward. And then open up the amazing potential of 5G then behind that. So those are the sort of things that we've been doing to then build out and prepare and make the network available then for this 5G era. One more thing I would just add to that is we talked a little bit about proof of concepts and trials and things. We've instigated a program of those across different verticals and different enterprise pieces, but that feel quite that are close to our hearts in terms of what we do as a business. So while we're looking at industry and that has been made a big move in the enterprise space, we're looking at certain use cases such as smart office, smart retail, smart cities, those sort of things that really resonate with our customers. So just a little few things there. I could, like Troy, I'd be glad to talk about this for hours, but I don't think your audience would.
I don't know. This is fascinating stuff. Before we move on, though, can you share a little bit about what drivers you're seeing for 5G slicing or private networks?
Yeah, sure. On the private network side, I think Gordon mentioned earlier about Germany and the regulatory piece there in enabling spectrum for private cellular. We've seen a real move in that direction that and a real driver from our customers to say this 5G stuff. We see it from the operators for powering our smartphones and our tablets and things. But what's the business to business opportunity? What's the wider piece of that? So we've seen some quite innovative customers coming to us and say, how can we use 5G or in our future business? And so we've got a couple of really exciting proof of concepts running around what the workplace is going to look like after this pandemic, for example. That's a really fascinating one, and also retail, how it can be used in retail, not just from a point of sale point of view, but also from a experiential marketing and those sorts of things, through to healthcare and the use of IoT in that space. So there are loads and loads of drivers going for that. And to tie this kind of into the topic around network slicing, we're seeing the need for real different performance requirements from each of these use cases. And so what I haven't seen yet, though, is from our reach is somebody turning around and say, I want complete separation, which I think will come about. They generally tend to go for a private private network rather than a slice of the pie, as it were, that we spoke about earlier. I'll let Troy and Gordon come in on some of the other stuff.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Gordon, we're coming back to you now. What could be the challenges to fulfill the promise?
Yeah, I think absolutely. There's so much promise, and I think continue to using the example, for example, on the consumer end, right? I think this really does take the entire ecosystem, not just the traditional CSP, the telco vendor, and even the cellular 3GPP standardizations. In the consumer end, I think that we mentioned about differentiating services and performance and quality of services by both Mark and Troy a few times. And I think in order to offer that, it needs to go beyond just the mobile operators. It needs to go into the Wi-Fi. It needs to go to the public cloud where most of the data applications are being hosted today. And also even to leverage the potential of the slicing, the device vendor and the OS needs to be participating and supporting the ecosystem as well. Now, for the industry verticals, that's more specifically for the smart factory, a lot of the industry automations lie in interoperability with some legacy, especially with layer 2 interoperability. So that's a new opportunity in the area for standardization technologies. Now, for enterprises, I think one of the key challenges, especially in the US, I think it's the same globally, 5G, the high band, it's about indoor coverages. First and foremost, in order for us to enjoy the benefits of slicing, we need to have cellular coverages. Private networks are solutions, but for enterprises, especially for employees during the pandemic, a lot of us are working from home. A lot of us is going to be a flex worker working in public locations in the offices. We need to make sure we have cellular coverages everywhere. And that's a big challenge that Ericsson is working together with the CSP trying to address in order to innovate the solution over the top.
Got it. So why is collaboration with Ecosystem Partnered Standardization beyond 3GPP important?
And I think that that's a very good question, Jeff. Just to the consumer using that as an example, the devices and the applications need to have the mechanism. The network can offer slices, but the application provider and the handsets need to be able, and devices needs to be able to connect into the slice. So in this round, Ericsson is working with the OEMs, working with the OS vendor, and even application provider to make sure this is happening with the network slicing. Now, and we mentioned about the enterprise use cases and working from home. When we talk about network slicing, it should really be extended beyond just 5G. It should go into Wi-Fi, it should go into the public network, it should go to the WAN. And actually, in fact, that's a working group that within MEF that we're working in under the Digital Service Committee. That's called the Network Slicing Profiles, that we wanted to make sure these experiences, these differentiating services could be offered not only in the 5G network, but offered uniformly across the different networks.
Gordon, sorry, Jeff, Gordon makes such an important point because it needs to go beyond 3GPP, because 3GPP stopped with network slicing at the RAN and core components and the device piece. And you've got this kind of out of scope piece in the middle that's called transport and network. So the work that's going on in MEF to be able to tie those together then enables that dynamic slicing that Troy spoke of right at the beginning, to tie all of those pieces together. Because really, if it's not fully end-to-end, then it's not really network slicing. It's just kind of quaz across the piece. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Oh, yeah,
Jeff,
please.
I totally agree with Mark and Gordon on this point. And from an ecosystem perspective, like, it's so important. I can't stress how much, if you don't have on your UE, on your handset or on your industrial device, an ability to terminate different slices, different slice types or subslices, and on the other end in the cloud, some visibility in terms of application aware slicing, then all bets are off. You're kind of really just allocating resources at that point versus managing a customer experience, which is really what it's all about. It's differentiated experiences and managing that customer experience for the application that they're using, for the use case that they're using. I want to, if I can, just very quickly talk about some of the pandemic stuff and the criticality of orchestration. So it applies to 5G and enabling dynamic slicing, and similar to Colt. At Bell, we've had a huge push from an orchestration perspective, and early in the pandemic, we would not have been able to reach the demand that came to our network, sometimes 3 times, 4 times more of what our regular demand was, and we were able to scale quickly only because we actually had the orchestration in place. So it's such a critical part of the future of any of these network technologies, 5G included.
Yeah, Troy, I want to stay with you here for the last question. Can you talk a little bit about some of the services that will be driven by 5G?
Yeah, I think, Gordon and Mark talked about a bunch of these, and I think I echo their comments. From a consumer perspective, I think what we're going to see is you're going to have customers who are going to be willing to pay extra to have that extra priority. That's one class of service. But more importantly, you're going to have specific personas of customers that are going to want to think about, okay, I'm a gamer, for example. That's a great use case because if you think about it, and we've seen a lot of experimentation happening and even launches in the Asian markets where, again, you have to enable it as an ecosystem, and you can't, as an operator, as a service provider, we can't do it alone either. We have to bring together partners and the right components to actually offer those services. So MEC is a big important component to be able to reduce your latency, as is the 5G NR radio better latency characteristics. And at the end of the day, we would launch services that are going to really enable those specific use cases. So the name of the game here really, again, we're sounding a bit like a broken record, is about differentiation. I think that's the big promise of 5G, is taking the resources that are in the network and being able to slice them up into different ways. If you think about enterprise, on the other hand, private networks have been around for a long time. We deploy them in 4G. But as we move to 5G, the value there is the accuracy that we're able to get to and the ability to have multiple different services actually run on that private network or as an extension of the public network are going to become capable. So I would say that both on the consumer and business side, we'll see a huge explosion of new services. I'll maybe throw one more example out there in the AR VR space. And the interesting thing about that one is it of course has, as most people would expect in the entertainment space, the ability, but because of the requirement for very low latency, so you don't get AR VR sickness, that's something that the promise of 5G can deliver. But then it also applies in the enterprise space for things like training, for AR expert assistance, even for healthcare, where a primary care physician could actually reach out and share in real time what he's experiencing with a patient with an expert that's not able to be on site. So some really amazing things. I think that we're in for a wild ride, lots of turbulent times in this ecosystem, but I think if we get the right pieces together and work together, it's going to be amazing.
All right, that's going to do it. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. To Network Slicing.
To Network Slicing. Cheers.